And welcome to this special extra episode of Lino with Laura. Loads of you have asked how we're going to frame this picture with its decal, and this film is to give you an insight into our framing process. So Ben's going to be doing the action and I'm going to be asking questions along the way. Hope you enjoy the film. So what's this material, Ben? What are you using it for?
This is the backing for the frame. It's 3mm MDF. I use this because it's a bit sturdier than some backing materials, and it gives a bit more strength to the frame.
So Ben, this jig that you've got here, did you design this or is this a plan that you saw somewhere else?
Well, this is something I've wanted ever since I started doing work with large sheets of material, because it's very difficult to cut them in an enclosed space, so this just really helps. It gives me somewhere to lay them, to cut them accurately.
So what are you using for the moulding here, Ben?
This is solid ash.
Right, okay,
I like to use ash, pretty wood.
Why do you use solid ash? Why not something with veneer?
You can get veneered mouldings like this, but they tend to be a bit bendy, so I like to have ash because it's very rigid, makes a nice strong frame.
Okay, so you're just underpinning it, aren't you? Putting a staple in it?
Yep, just like that.
Lovely. So you're going to cut this glass yourself?
I am, yes. I cut all my glass myself.
What are you fiddling with on the ruler?
It's a little gizmo I made for myself to speed up the process of cutting. So it just rests against the glass. So when I put the straight edge here...
Hang on a minute, let me just... It's a couple of bits of metal...
aluminium, yep.
And a bulldog clip.
And a bulldog clip.
Fantastic.
Held together with sellotape.
That's really classy.
It
Not
is.
gaffer tape.
Well, actually, it's masking tape.
Is it really tricky cutting glass? Because it always seems terrifying to me.
It's very tricky because I don't have my glass cutter.
So is it tricky to cut glass? Because it always seems like a terrifying thing to me.
I've cut so much of it since I started framing for you that I don't find it difficult or tricky anymore. The thing that really makes it easy is having a decent glass cutter.
So show me what you've got. Can you show the camera?
This is a Toyo oil-filled glass cutter.
So that barrel's actually got oil in it, mineral oil.
It does, and the mineral oil comes out through the roller wheel, so it kind of lubricates it all the time. And I've just scored this, and I don't know if you'll be able to see this on the film, but that's it. Broken.
Very neat.
And I find that since I had a decent quality glass cutter, I very, very rarely have a problem cutting anything.
So under the table, you've built yourself a little sort of glass store there to keep things safe.
If I've got big enough offcuts that they might be useful for another project, then I store them.
Right.
If they're too small, so for me that's anything less than about A3 or thereabouts, then I just cut them into smaller bits so that I can dispose of them easily.
And is this special glass?
This is stuff called TrueView AR70 glass, and we decided some time ago that we needed to give your pictures the kind of respect that we felt they needed. So this reduces reflections by a significant amount, and also reduces UV by about 70%. And that combination of almost complete loss of the reflections and quite a heavy reduction in UV, we felt was the best kind of balance for us.
But it comes at a bit of a price, doesn't it?
It costs roughly 6 or 7 times as much as plain glass that we used to use, but as a proportion of the total amount of money you spend on a picture, we feel it's worthwhile. Yeah,
I mean we do, because I don't think anybody has ever gone for plain glass when they've seen how good this stuff is.
Not given the choice, no.
So this is the mount board you're using for the inside mount, is that right?
Yeah, this goes behind the print.
Oh, right, okay.
So the print will effectively be floating in front of it.
Right, and the mount board, what would you recommend people use? What do we use?
There are a lot of different kinds of mount board on the market. We use a high quality conservation grade mount board. It's good for the longevity of the printed of the framed up work.
And again, this little jig that you're using, you devised this, did you?
Sort of, yeah. The mount cutter is a commercial mount cutter, but I mounted it into a table because it made it much quicker to use. So rather than marking the back of the mount board with a pencil, I have a rule along the side and I just line it up and it's right.
And there's a blade in that little handle thing, yeah?
Yep, yeah, just a little sharp razor blade kind of thing, quite rigid.
So this is foam board you're using, aren't you?
Yeah, foam core. It's a very lightweight material that I'm using to go behind the print to lift it away from the mount board to give that floating effect.
It's interesting how little inks come, well, no inks come through to the back of the paper there, isn't
Yeah, I guess that's because you use so little ink.
it? Yeah, just to remind everyone, that's the Kitakata paper that we printed with, and here comes the foam board.
So I'm just putting it in the middle. As I'm doing it by eye, but I want to do it as carefully and as accurately as I can.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm putting just the merest indication of where the corners are on the back of the print.
So which washi is that?
This is Kozo Natural Thin. I have to confess here that this came out of a sample pack of fine washi papers, and
that's an origami pack as well, isn't it?
It is an origami paper, yeah. But it works absolutely brilliantly for this particular job because it's incredibly strong, and it's a similar colour to the paper that we're working with.
So what's this stuff?
The tape is an archival. It's actually designed for book repairs and things like that.
Okay.
Acid free, very long lasting, and what I'm doing is to create a strip of tape that will just stick on the back of the print.
So sort of minimum impact on the print.
Minimum contact, yeah.
Okay. What's that? Who's the manufacturer? Just in case anybody's interested. Do you want to hold the box up to the camera so we can look at the smiley man?
Filmoplast P, and this is their thinnest tape.
Right.
I have to say I wouldn't be so happy doing this with
It's pretty thin there. Look.
With a really weighty piece of artwork, but this Kitakata paper is so fine.
Kitakata, if I remember right, is 36 grams, and this washi that you're using to attach it is 25
grams, yeah, really lightweight.
Very, very lightweight papers,
so
but very
I've got
strong.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I need another 3, so I'll do those along the bottom here.
It seems like a lot of bits of tape.
It is a lot of bits of tape, but it's important that the print is held reasonably flat to the foam board. So now I resort to my scalpel and I just cut off this strip. It's not essential that it's super accurate, but you want it to be nice and neat. And what I'm going to do is place a ruler as a guide between the corner points of my where I've marked it on the back of the print, and these tabs now have to go on the back of the print inside that line.
Right, so these are going to go in the right place to be attaching to the foam board and leaving that margin around the edge.
Yeah, you'll see when I put the foam board on, you'll see how this works.
Okay. I mean, this is the bit that people who buy prints, they kind of don't see, and I don't think an awful lot of people buying framed work give thought beyond the moulding of the frame. You know, do I like the colour and do I like the moulding? But the inside is actually the more important bit in a way, isn't it?
It is. The inside is what protects the image. I mean, the outside is important too in terms of choosing materials which are durable, because you
hence the solid wood that we use. But I mean, if you're interested in hearing more about this, Ben did an interview with Peter Keegan and me on our podcast Ask an Artist. There's a whole episode on framing and mounting, so if you want to have some more details, just tune into Ask an Artist podcast, and you'll find that anywhere you download podcasts.
Now, you can't see these from the front of the print. And just to make absolutely sure that they don't come off during the life of the print in its frame, what I do is I burnish them with, this is an agate burnishing.
That is a lovely thing. Can we just have a little close up on that, because I covered that. Isn't that gorgeous?
This is actually for gilding, but it works brilliantly for this particular job because it's absolutely smooth, so it doesn't leave any marks anywhere.
If I could only think of something it would be good for me, I'd have one. But
well, I shall know where to look if I ever can't find it.
I'll be wearing it around my neck.
Quite possibly. Right. Okay, now I'm just going to check the front to see that everything looks good. And as you can see from the front, you can't see it at all.
No sign of that.
So now the next bit is to replace the foam core board. And sometimes the foam core is very slightly bowed like this, and I always make sure that the bowed side is towards the print, because that way when I stick it to the mount board it goes flat.
Clever.
It is.
Actually, this filming thing's not as easy as it looks.
Really?
Yeah, funny that.
Yeah, it is. Very odd. Right. So now we've attached the tabs to the back of the print. The next bit is to attach the print onto the back of the foam board. Actually, onto the front of the foam board, but from the bag.
Right.
So we just fold the tabs over and use another piece of the same archival tape to stick it down.
Right.
And
now
the way I do it is I do it this one and then over here, the opposite one over here.
So that keeps the print flat.
Yeah. Now, one thing I did find out once when I did one of these is you don't want to make this too tight, because if you make it too tight it distorts the print.
Good to know.
So,
and the foam board itself, what I was going to say is that the whiteness of the foam board is going to light up this paper, the natural colour of the paper, so that the print really glows.
it does, yeah. It looks absolutely amazing when you've got these finished.
But if you weren't float mounting this with a Deckled, if you were going to put it flat into a mount, you'd still back it with white paper, wouldn't
Absolutely.
you?
I always put a sheet of white paper behind my the work I'm framing.
Any work?
Yeah, I do, because I feel it's nice to have a barrier between the backing of the frame and the artwork. Right. And if you don't have something in there, then if the backing gets damaged or something, then the next thing is the print. So,
well, we've seen some shockers from your grandfather's collection of artwork, haven't we?
Yeah, I'm afraid we have. He was not the best of framers.
Yeah, Ben's grandfather, the artist James Boswell, was a very fine illustrator and painter, but not quite so fine at framing.
So I think that's the last one.
I'll just go for a close-up there.
So now I can dispense with the archival tape. I'll just have a quick look at the print the right way up. As you can see, it's now, if I put it down on the mount board, you can see it's held away from the mount board, which is what we're hoping for. A few bits of dust on there to get rid of. I'll give that a nice brush before I put it in the frame there. So the foam board is held onto the mount board using another kind of tape, and this one is not an archival tape. This is a very high grab double-sided tape, but it's so far away from the print that I feel quite comfortable about using that.
So when you say a high grab double-sided tape, is this a framing tape?
It is.
Where do you get it?
It is used in framing.
Because I'm thinking of people wanting to stick lino to backing boards as well.
Well, I would love to suggest it as a suitable material for sticking lino to backing boards, but actually it's too thick. It
is quite chunky now. I see it rolled out.
It's chunky tape. For what I'm doing here, it's absolutely fine, but it's too thick for that.
So I'll have to find something else to show everyone when we get onto the second series of Lino with Laura.
I think you will, yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that.
So that's enough tape. I'm just going to rub it down so that it's well adhered to the back of the foam core.
So even though we are now in a reasonably dust-free place, you're still going to check, aren't you, about the print's clear of dust?
Absolutely. I've framed so much stuff over the years, and there's nothing more heart-rending than getting to the end of a job and finding a big piece of dust inside the frame and then having to take it all out, open it up again, get rid of the dust, often clean the glass again. It's heartbreaking, it really is.
So just being careful all the way along is the answer.
All the time. You check at every stage. You check when you put the print into the frame, you check before you put the staples on, all the way along.
So what's the next step then?
Well, when I measured up the print, I took a measurement for the size of the print itself, and then I added a border, and that's the amount of this mount board that's going to be exposed.
Right.
In the past, I've made little L-shaped pieces to get it accurately positioned in the middle, but actually I found that just using a load of rulers is just as easy. So I get the rulers and I put them, I know it's 7 centimetres, so I line the rulers up 7 centimetres in from the edge.
Okay.
We'll get that tape. So that goes there, 7 centimetres. And now, when I turn the print over to stick it down, I have a guide. Oh, I have plenty of guides actually, so I want to get it centred side to side and then a level across the top.
I noticed that you're mounting it facing away from you. Is that just how it's come?
That just is how it happened to be. Okay. I don't mind which way around it is. So now the print has been dropped, and at the moment it's just resting there, but as soon as I put any pressure on it, it is fixed. It cannot be moved. Just get rid of the rulers. I'm going to get a nice clean piece of board.
So this is just you putting additional pressure on the print
Just making
without...
sure that it's that the foam core is stuck to the mount board really firmly, because I really don't want it to come off. Now, if at some point I did need to take it off, then just going in underneath the print, I can see the edges of the tape that I've used, and I can just run a blade through those edges.
Having made sure that you have a razor sharp scalpel blade.
Of course.
A new one.
Okay, so I'm done with the contents of the frame, and now we're ready for some assembly.
So what are you doing here, Ben?
Well, the idea of a box frame is that there's a space behind the glass, and the glass is at the front and the mount board is at the back, and in order to keep them apart I put in some fillets of wood.
So those just go inside the frame?
And those go inside the frame.
Yeah,
so what I have to do is to cut these so accurately that they're held in place by just by how tight they are.
So this fantastic old machine...
Well, this is how I used to make frames when I first started working, doing stuff for you. All of my frames were cut using an old circular saw and then trimmed using this, and this just shaves a little bit of wood off the end of the
So is this effectively the same as the big one you were using in the
it's
workshop?
Very similar, yes. It does the same thing. It's a guillotine rather than a saw. And
it looks Victorian, but it's not, is it?
No, it's brand new. Well, I say brand new. This one's a good few years old because I've had it for a long time. But it's called a mitre trimmer.
And do you have to sharpen it? I mean, do you take the blades off? Or?
Do you know, I've sharpened it only once in all the time I've had it, and it's still very sharp. I have even cut myself on it a couple of times. I'm just going to work my way around the frame.
And where do you get the fillets of wood from?
Well, I'm a bit of a purist about this. I personally like the fillet to be the same material as the frame. A lot of framers use the same material as the mount board rather than as the frame.
Oh, so they're cutting card mounts.
So they card fillets.
Right.
So they'll use a piece of card to line the inside of the box.
Okay.
I just prefer it with the wood of the moulding inside the frame. I think it just looks nicer. And so I have to make these myself. So I buy ash. I sometimes use old offcuts of moulding. And I cut them down on a table saw, and then I trim them using a surface planer.
So what's the next step, Ben?
I just need to put a bit of tape on the back of each of the fillets.
So this is different tape yet again, isn't it?
Yeah. There's loads of different kinds of tape used in picture framing. This is just to stop the fillets from moving.
They're really tight in there, aren't they?
They are, yeah. That's the best way, really. So they won't move at the corners, but there's just a slight danger that if they're not stuck, then the middles might bow out slightly.
Okay.
So the tape is just to hold it there.
So that's a double-sided tape too, isn't it? And that one might be more appropriate for sticking down lino. I'm desperate to find it.
Oh, I know you are, love, but really, these are not terribly strong tapes. These are,
and I suspect they're quite expensive tapes as well, aren't they?
This one's not too bad. I like this one because this one's called finger lift tape, and the adhesive on the tape only goes half the width of the tape, so it's really easy to get your fingernail underneath
right,
it
okay, so you can
lift
peel this
it
off
up
really
again.
easily. Yeah.
Right, so now I'm going to just put those to one side, because now I have one of the most important jobs, which is to clean the glass.
So what are you going to use for that?
I have some wonderful Wessex Pictures glass and mirror cleaner.
Actually, we should have a shout out for Wessex Pictures because they are a terrific company. We get a lot of stuff from them.
Yeah, we get all our picture framing supplies from them.
We'll drop a link in for anybody who's interested. So they're really nice guys there.
So the spray is a safe material to use in picture frames. There's no acids in it or anything. And the way you have to use it is to spray on a little of it and then wipe with a lint-free cloth until all the moisture's gone. So you just keep going at it until you can't see any more moisture on the surface. This anti-reflective glass takes a little more effort to get it absolutely clean. And if you
that's because it's got a coating on it, hasn't it? It's not. Some anti-reflective glasses are actually a texture, aren't they?
Yeah, but this is a coated glass. It removes the reflections by interfering with them rather than diffusing them. And the cheaper kinds of reflection control glasses, they use a texture to diffuse the reflection. Right. And they're absolutely fine if the artwork is immediately touching the back of the glass. But if there's a space, and clearly in a box frame there's a big space, but if there's a space, then they make the artwork look very soft.
So they sort of blur it a bit?
Yeah.
All right. But is it okay for the artwork to touch the glass in a picture frame?
I wouldn't do it for original artwork. If you're talking about reproductions and things like that.
So stuff like giclée prints?
Yeah, it's less of an issue because the things are inherently less valuable. So now we've got the glass nice and clean, I'm just going to lift that up and put the frame in place underneath it. And lift the glass gently into place. Well, drop the glass into place, but it's supported by a layer of air, so it's not so risky.
Have you ever cut yourself doing it?
Oh, regularly, but not ever very badly.
No.
So now I'm putting the fillets in, and they just go in and are pushed into place, and I just squeeze with my thumb to get the tape to adhere. And in the corners they're mitered so that the corners show as just a line where the mitered pieces join. And it just looks like the inside of the mitre of the frame joint, the corner. I'm trying my hardest not to touch the glass at all, because I don't want to get fingerprints on the inside of the glass.
No.
And then the last piece is just slotted into place, squeezed tight. So now the glass is held in by the fillets, and just to be sure, I can see there's a little bit of, no, that was on the back, but just to be sure there's no dust in there, I've compressed air here, which I'm just going to blow it out. Now I'm just going to move that out of the way so I can get the picture in front of me. I can see there are quite a few bits of dust and stuff on the picture. So I have this lovely brush that I bought when we were in Japan.
Oh yes, I've got envy for that
Rather
brush.
sexy.
Is it goat hair?
Do you know, I've not the faintest idea.
Actually no, it looks like a sort of vegetable
nice.
thing. Actually.
I don't know. But it's...
Might be hemp or something.
It's quite nice to take the dust off. It's not abrasive, and I want to make sure that there's no dust underneath the print. And just a few moments taken at this point when everything is accessible is well worth the effort, because you don't want to put everything together and then find that you have to open it up again. That's just so annoying.
And also well worth checking that I've signed it properly.
Yep. I have once or twice put them together and found Laura hasn't signed them.
Print is numbered and signed properly, so that's all done.
So now we just drop the frame back down, face down, and the print is flipped over, and that's supported by the back of the fillet.
Alright, so it's actually sitting on the ends of the fillets of wood.
Yeah, on the edges.
Right.
Yeah.
So they act as a spacer, just keeping that in the right place.
Yeah, they create the space between the glass and the mount board. And that goes in there. Now it's very tempting at this point to go round and put nails in to hold the backing with my trusty nail gun, but the safer thing to do is that you just put in one on each side, and then you have a look at it, because you want to make sure that there's no dust in there. And there are some spots of dust, but they're all on the outside, so I'm quite happy with that. Good. So now I just need to put the rest of the nails in.
So this gizmo you're using, it's like a sort of sideways stapler or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it's exactly like a sideways stapler. I've just noticed that it's nearly run out, so it uses things called framers points.
Yeah.
And you just slide the framers points in here. There's a little stack of them, and they're pushed down by the lever, and each time you squeeze it, it sends one shooting out the front. so we're all nailed up at the back and everything's now much more solid and secure. So typically I'll now have another look at it just to make sure I don't see any bits of dust or anything, because it's easier to take the back off now when it's only nailed in than after I put the tape on. So I'm quite happy that that's all right.
So it's a bit like
tape it up.
the printmaking, where I'm looking to see that everything's right and there's no ink that's going to transfer and stuff like that. It's just endless checking.
It's just being vigilant the whole time that you're not creating a problem which later on is going to mean that you're not happy with the result. Now, just to secure everything and to prevent the possibility of dust or insects or anything else getting in the back, I seal it up with this brown tape.
Now that's not the same tape we use to pack parcels, because we use brown tape. We've stopped using plastic. So
no, this is a very expensive tape sold specifically for this kind of masking work or sealing frames up.
All right, so it's going to be better, sturdier and longer lasting.
Yeah.
Because the thing about selling prints is that they often are in store for a while, and what you don't want is the backing tape to curl up and come off and look shabby.
I'm sure I could get away with doing this slightly less pedantically, but somehow it gives me pleasure to look at the back of a print that's been well sealed up.
Well, I think it's quite important that you kind of try and keep a level of excellence throughout.
Yeah, if you frame things carelessly, then it shows a lack of respect for the work. And you can't sell something to somebody that looks like it's been put together with no respect.
But we're very lucky because we do all this. Well, I'm very lucky in having a framer in-house, but it does mean that we can have very high standards and still afford to frame this way. But there are other ways around it. I know plenty of artists who have excellent relationships with the framer and don't do everything in-house.
The difficulty, of course, for somebody like you is that as a printmaker, you don't produce a work of art, you produce an edition of works of art.
Yes.
And it means that your requirements for framing are ongoing and high.
But also, I don't work to a standard size. My sizes are...
Don't I know it?
I don't even work to a square shape occasionally. But the thing about it is that because of the way that I draw, and I'm constantly correcting and editing the drawing, they almost never fit a specific size. So you have to kind of think on your feet when you come to the framing. And sometimes that's deciding how much white space there is, and because not all my pictures end neatly in a rectangle.
And this has been quite an interesting project in all, because you've started out with a size and worked towards it.
Yeah.
The size being the size of an uncut sheet of Kitakata. Normally it would be a piece of paper that had been cut to size.
That's right,
to fit your artwork rather than the other way around.
Well, the next one that I printed, Kitakata, I'm actually going to use Kitakata from a roll, because they're now producing Kitakata on a roll at Awagami, so it'll be a question of cutting it. What are you doing there when you lift the...
I just like the edge of the tape to line up with the edge of the frame. And when you stretch the tape, sometimes it curves slightly.
All right, so it's just...
It's just me being pedantic again, actually.
But it's nice, because you get a much nicer result. So.
It doesn't alter the quality of the frame at all. It's just a little bit of OCD on my part. Okay, now you find out which is the top and which is the bottom.
So those are little spacers that you're putting on?
These are little felt bumpers, and they help the frame to sit cleanly against the wall. And if the frame is adjusted slightly so that to get it level, they give a little bit more friction so that it doesn't move.
Yeah. Is there a convention for distances and things when you're putting string on the back of a picture?
Only in my head. I always put the string 1/3 of the way down the frame.
So not halfway down?
Oh, absolutely not halfway down. If you put it halfway down, then the frame hangs quite at an angle out from the wall.
Oh, of course, yes.
The further down the frame you are, the more the top will pull forward. So I use 1/3. Some people use higher. Some people use other methods altogether. That you can get various hardware solutions that put stuff on the top edge, or that use split pins and things through the backboard. But with the hardwood frames that we use, the frames are strong enough to take this kind of treatment. And given that they're strong enough, I would rather use the frame than rely on a thin piece of MDF. So,
well, presumably you put anything like that through the MDF before you seal it all up.
yes, you do.
I was going to say, I don't like the idea of punching things through the back of the picture.
The way that works is that you drill a small hole through the MDF. Actually, a couple of small holes through
right.
it. then you use a D-ring or something else with a split pin going through the
understand,
backboard.
right. I see.
And then on the back, on the inside of the MDF, you open up the split pin and put tape over it to protect the contents of the frame. But I've never used those. But I know that some framers swear by them. There are all sorts of ways of doing it. But I'm terribly stuck in my ways with this, so I just do it this way always.
Well, we have kind of reviewed framing quite regularly over the years, haven't we? It's something that's a tricky thing.
If I decided there were a better way of doing it, then we would almost certainly change.
Yeah. And styles change and stuff as well.
Yeah, they do.
So is there some fancy knot you're doing?
This is a Bowline. It's not a particularly fancy knot, but it's a knot that the harder you pull on it, the tighter it gets. And with this nylon string, if you don't have something that gets tighter as you pull it, then it just undoes, which is
not
a little alarming. Yeah. So that's how I tie them up.
So once this is done, Ben will hand this over to me and I will write on the back my name, the title and the type of print it is. And it also gets like a luggage label with sales information, edition number, all that kind of thing. And it goes onto our computer system and is logged as well. So we do have ways of keeping track of what's been framed and how it's, where it is and things like that.
You sound like you're just about to make a little advert for our latest episode of Ask an Artist podcast.
Yeah, actually, I'd forgotten about that. We have just done it. It's not come out yet. We've just recorded an episode on exactly that. The sort of cataloguing of work and how you look after your prints and paintings.
Because we're using a special kind of glass, we put a little label on the back, which just gives the ultimate owner of the picture a bit of instruction on how to clean it. And then this little folder will contain a certificate of authenticity for the print so that you can keep it with the picture.
So after all this, Ben, it's finished. So let's have a final reveal of this beautifully framed print.
Okay then, here we go. Oh,
fantastic! That's looking really lovely.
I think it's just what it needs.